Hi, I'm Dr. Faye Snyder. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about NFL running back Adrian Peterson. He was arrested on child abuse charges for whipping his bear son until he bled. How could he do that? As always, we answer that question by reviewing childhood issues. Adrian grew up in a family of star athletes. His mother was a sprinter and long jumper, and his father had aspirations of playing basketball for the NBA. His dreams were derailed when his brother accidentally shot him in the knee while cleaning his gun. Like many parents, Adrian's father was able to live out his unfulfilled dreams through his sons, and mothers do that too through their daughters, and we all know that some parents overdo it. Adrian's father nicknamed him AD for all day because his father said that he could go all day long. He was described as hyperactive. When children are hyperactive, it usually means that they are repressing some emotions that are unacceptable. I'm not surprised. Adrian's own son, by the way, was 4 years old at the time of the accusation of child abuse. So I'm imagining that Adrian was reenacting something that happened to him around 4 years old or younger. Usually we don't reenact something until we're of the age that we experienced it. So Adrian's father probably invested a great deal of enthusiasm in his older son, Brian, who was only 2 years older than Adrian, but he was the firstborn. When Adrian was 7, while riding his bicycle, he witnessed his beloved brother, Brian, be killed by a drunk driver. The tragedy occurred after Adrian's parents had already separated, so we're starting to amass a series of traumatic events. Peterson's father was sentenced to 10 years in prison when Adrian was 13 for apparently laundering drug money. Based on what Adrian and his father have both said, Adrian specifically was taught that whenever he experienced pain, it was not to complain, but to push through and use the pain as a driving force. As a young adult, Adrian's half-brother, Chris Paris, his mother's other son, was shot. They were about the same age, about a year apart. He was killed in Houston. It appears that Adrian was raised in a relatively violent culture. In extreme cases, when children are taught to take pride in their ability to endure the lash without crying, it tends to create a rather ruthless consciousness, just because at some point there's going to be a reenactment where the child grows up to become the inflictor instead of the victim. It just about guarantees that the injury will be passed on to the next generation whenever a child swallows an emotional pain. I have in the past sometimes called it the sociopathic decision. That came to me when I was learning about Adolf Hitler's childhood and how his father would whip him, and Adolf came to take pride in his ability to bear the lash and not cry. What happens is that these children dissociate, they bury the pain, and then later on they reenact it. Another problem that comes with burying this pain is that the child believes that what's happening to them is appropriate and right and fair. And Adrian himself is quoted as saying, "I have always believed that the way my parents disciplined me has a great deal to do with the success that I have enjoyed as a man." I would refer to this as a repression ethic and say that Adrian was enlisted in his loyalty to his father and to his parents no matter what. Whenever a child is traumatized and they believe that it was for their own good, that will ensure that they will hand it down to the next generation. And not only that, they won't self-reflect, they won't purge, they won't release the trauma because it's forbidden. So with his older son gone, Adrian's father turned to Adrian as his hope and consolation. He coached Adrian's Pee-wee football team, and both of them pushed through the loss of Brian. To Adrian, whipping his son was what he knew. It was normal. It was a normal part of how parents discipline children. At least that's what he believed. We know of a story where Adrian was about 12 years old when his father whipped him with a belt in front of 20 classmates. One of his classmates recalls the incident and said, "We still talk about it to this day. My dad was tough, but his dad was real tough." So we know Adrian was whipped as a child, and I can guarantee you that his father was whipped as a child, and his father's father was whipped as a child, and his father's father's father was whipped all the way back to slavery. Studies have shown that there's a higher incidence of corporal punishment amongst African Americans, and I suspect that there's also a higher rate amongst those raised in the South. I say that because I was raised in the South up until I was 12, and my mother was raised in Selma, Alabama until she was an adult, and she used to send me out to the tree to pick a switch, which, by the way, is emotional abuse as well as physical abuse, because it's incumbent upon the child to find the switch that will hurt the least. And how do you do that? Is it a thick one? Is it a thin one? Retired NBA All-Star and sports analyst Charles Barkley has defended corporal punishment.
I'm from the South. Whipping is, we do that all the time. Every black parent in the South is going to be in jail under those circumstances.
It doesn't matter where you're from. Right is right and wrong is wrong. It doesn't matter where you're from.
I don't believe that, because, listen, we spank kids in the South. I think the question about did Adrian Peterson go overboard? But listen, Jim, we all grow up in different environments. Listen, every black parent in my neighborhood in the South would be in trouble or in jail under those circumstances.
Listen, my thing...
You're not put in jail for whipping your child. You may lose custody of your child until you take parenting classes and until you work it through so that you come up with other ways to discipline.
I think we have to really be careful trying to teach other parents how to discipline their kids. That's a very fine line.
All right.
What Barkley is saying is that we should let it be. It's not our business. Don't try to change it. And it's the way we are. But it is our business, and it's time to change, because violence begets violence. Whipping is the legacy of slavery. You would think that every black parent would try to work that through as quickly as possible. You would think that black parents would be opposed to whipping, especially their own children. But there's a reason why they aren't, and that's because it's imprinted. Imprinting is a process that takes place from generation to generation. Children imprint the way we are treated. The way we are treated becomes normal. The physiology behind imprinting is mirror neurons. They record all our experiences and what we witness, and what we live through becomes normal until we consciously reevaluate. So Adrian is now learning new discipline techniques, and hopefully he's in therapy, dealing with some of the injuries that he never acknowledged. This is not about blaming parents, but it's about understanding our own history in order to manage our own drives and not to pass it on. Adrian appears to be honest and forthright. He responded to the charges in a non-defensive way. To paraphrase, he said, I didn't know there were better ways, and I'm learning better ways now. So if you're watching Adrian, if you want to break an imprint, you have to acknowledge that your father was wrong. It doesn't mean that you didn't love him deeply or that he didn't love you deeply. It's just a really bad practice that harms people. It harmed you, it harmed your father, and it harmed your child. The real problem with corporal punishment is that it teaches us to solve problems with violence. It also creates deficits in communication skills, problem solving, and self-reflection. And by the way, repression of those feelings prevents healing. Adrian, you still could have become a great football player with your father's love and coaching. You didn't have to suffer to be great.